Welcome to the Good for America podcast. I'm your host, former Congressman Bob Good, former chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. The title of this podcast is The Truth About Energy and Climate. I want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast, rate the show, share it with your friends, follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good. Let's jump into the truth about energy and climate. This is an issue that I've wanted to talk about for some time. It's something I've spent a lot of time studying about over the last 6 or 7 years. I want to just acknowledge up front that I've been greatly helped more recently by Alex Epstein, and I recommend his best-selling book, Fossil Future. I have for some time instinctively known the truth about this issue, but Alex Epstein has helped me to equip me with more facts and confidence to go on the attack about this very important issue. The fact is, catastrophic man-made climate change is the greatest hoax perpetrated upon the human race since the impossibility of evolution. Again, catastrophic man-made climate change is the biggest hoax since evolution. And we need to boldly tell the truth about energy and climate as it impacts every area of life. Energy security is national security. Energy security is economic security. Energy security is food security. And energy security is health security. Human flourishing should be the priority when we're talking about energy policy. Leftist Democrat policies will result in massive cost increases for energy. They will cause tremendous harm to energy access and reliability. Leftist Democrat policies will literally result in loss of life, and they will make little to no difference on the actual climate or the environment. The fact is, the left operates from a zero-impact, anti-human worldview. Let me say that again. The left operates from a zero-impact on the environment, an anti-human worldview where they prioritize the environment and they devalue human life and human flourishing. By human flourishing, I mean humans' ability to live healthy, happy, productive, fulfilling lives and to access and obtain the things that they need to do that. To the left, no impact on the environment is paramount, regardless of the consequence to humans. So the Democrats, the left, they don't care about the value of the energy or the benefit to humans. They just want to have no impact on the environment. And they will estimate that we need to spend something like $100 trillion on climate change in the hope of possibly impacting the climate by maybe, or the temperature, Earth's temperature by maybe 1 degree over 100 years or so. It's hard to pin them down on exactly how much they think we should spend and how much of an impact we can have. But the fact is, I've heard them estimate as much as $100 trillion when our entire economy is less than 30 trillion and our annual budget is less than 7 trillion. And while wealthy nations like the US would suffer under Democrat leftist energy climate policies, poor undeveloped countries would suffer far greater degrees, far more. An honest and an effective discussion on energy must consider the benefits provided from energy in addition to any negatives associated with energy production. For example, we wouldn't consider if we're talking about the value of automobiles or cars, we're going to talk about the pros and the cons. Yes, an automobile provides some degree of danger from an accident, but think about what it does for us in terms of our ability to live and to move and to have reliable, affordable transportation. Same thing with airplanes or surgeries. You look at the benefits, not just the negatives on a surgery. I mean, a surgery is painful. A surgery requires recovery, but of course, there's tremendous benefit at the same time. Vaccines are obviously controversial right now, but let's say that the most trusted and most respected vaccines, they cause some risk or include some risk, but there's benefit that's been associated with them historically. Same things with pesticides. You wouldn't just consider the negatives of pesticides without the value that pesticides have brought to bring food production to different levels around the world and allow us to feed the world to a much greater degree. But the fact is the benefits of fossil fuel use far exceeds the associated risks or negatives. Again, the benefit of fossil fuel use, think energy, think fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, and coal, far exceed the associated risks or negatives. Fossil fuels make the world a vastly more livable, more safe, more productive, and more prosperous place for all of us. The fact is, we're learning to master climate change. Are there small degrees, limited climate change impact? Uh, Most of us recognize some minimal impact to that extent. But the fact is, we're learning to master that despite the ridiculous predictions in recent decades by these opportunistic grifters such as Al Gore and John Kerry and many others who've gotten wealthy off of this issue. We have machines as a result of fossil fuels. We build that help us to deal with any climate change impact. We have stronger structures to withstand storms and the impact of the climate. We have the ability to relocate as we need to. And we have other adaptive and resilient strategies that have allowed us to adjust and adapt to climate change as it's come about during the 10,000 years or so of human history. The fact is, God put fossil fuels in the earth for us to harvest them and to utilize them and to enjoy them. And nothing has brought more advancement or industry or prosperity around the globe like fossil fuels. Nothing has increased life expectancy in formerly undeveloped countries or underdeveloped countries like China and India, for that matter. Fossil fuels have helped to reduce poverty, disease, and starvation around the world. They have brought, again, more prosperity, more industry, more economic development, and extended life expectancy like nothing else. So we need more fossil fuel production and more reliable, affordable energy, not less. Underdeveloped countries especially need more access to affordable, reliable energy. So much of the world still remains energy deficient, and they're suffering as a result. And the fact is, America is the cleanest and most efficient large energy producer on the planet. And we want to stay that way. We don't want to rely upon foreign adversaries or dirty producers for vital energy. The free market should dictate the availability and the cost for various forms of energy. And to be clear, there should be no government subsidies for any form of energy. And that means for the fossil fuel industry as well. But there should be no government subsidies for any form of energy. The government ought not to be putting their thumb on the scale, to picking losers and winners, helping some forms of energy, hurting other forms of energy. We need to unleash nuclear energy. We could spend several podcasts on that issue, but we need to unleash nuclear energy, which is extremely safe, extremely clean, and has tremendous upside potential, tremendous untapped potential. We have to remove the barriers to nuclear energy and the effective criminalization of nuclear production, which has occurred in this country for the last few decades. Another underdeveloped source is hydroelectric energy, which is low cost, it's reliable, and it's renewable because natural sources refill rivers with water. We can't prioritize or subsidize unaffordable, unreliable energy. And we're speaking specifically to wind, solar, electric vehicles, that kind of thing. The ability for humans to significantly impact climate change has been greatly exaggerated. There's only been about a 1 degree increase in the last 150 years or so that fossil fuels have been in use in this country. And we can adapt and adjust to very slow, very modest climate change. The models and predictions regarding climate have been historically inaccurate, they're inconsistent, and they are distorted for political purposes. That's why so-called global cooling transitioned to so-called global warming, which then transitioned to just climate change. And the reason it's climate change, because then you can include and encapsulate anything that happens in the environment or with the climate with climate change and blame it on fossil fuels or human activity. But some climate change, even warming, is positive. And the fact is, more people die from cold on this planet than from heat. And so some colder areas getting very slightly warmer is good for the people who live there, and it actually helps us to produce more food on this planet. Carbon dioxide is needed for plant life, and it's not the negative that the climate extremists would have us believe that it is. Climate-related deaths are actually decreasing on the earth today, and they're lower than ever before. In fact, people are 50 times less likely to suffer a climate death than they were 100 years ago when it was about 1 degree warmer than it is today. Climate-related deaths have decreased by 98% over the last 100 years, as fossil fuel use has exploded during that time. Let me say it again. Climate-related deaths have decreased by 98% over the last 100 years, as fossil fuel use has exploded during that time. So we should be unapologetically pro-fossil fuels. We need to be unapologetically anti-subsidization, that we don't subsidize any form of energy. And we need to be pro-reliable, affordable energy without apology. We need to reject the talking points, the narratives, and the conclusions of the radical left on this issue. We should reject the equivalency of different forms of energy, or the all of the above so-called policy, and instead prioritize reliable, affordable energy. I cringe when I hear Republican politicians say, I support all the above, as if all forms of energy are equal. Or if they, or Republican politicians, they say, hey, we want to get off fossil fuels responsibly. No, we don't want to get off fossil fuels. We need to reject the position that we should work to end fossil fuel use. We must recognize that wind and solar are totally unrealistic from a cost, from an availability, and from an efficiency standpoint. Let me say it again, we must recognize that wind and solar are totally unrealistic from a cost, availability, and efficiency standpoint. In fact, wind and solar provide only about 3% of the world's electricity, and even that is unaffordable without subsidies. So with all the subsidies and all the advantages and all the prioritization that's been given here in the United States and around the world in Europe and these other woke countries, there's more energy produced globally today from burning wood than there is from the 3% that comes from wind and solar. Wind and solar are frankly just too expensive to deliver efficiently. They are intermittent, they are unreliable, and they require natural gas or fossil fuel as a backup. Renewables, like wind and solar, they cannot produce the kinds of energy that we need for things like heavy-duty transportation. Think ships, ocean liners, planes, heavy equipment. Wind and solar could never produce that. Renewables like wind and solar can't produce industrial process heat to make things, or the production of things like plastic and cement. In fact, the vast majority of the items we use in daily life are produced from fossil fuels. You are right now listening to this podcast or watching this podcast in an office, in a home, in a vehicle, with almost everything around you is produced by fossil fuels. Despite all the attacks, the criticism, the penalties, thankfully, fossil fuels still provide about 80% of the world's energy. And we must relentlessly work to end, again, the subsidies for the green climate subsidies, the renewable subsidies, the EV subsidies, the wind and solar, and so forth. They should have to stand on their own merits based on their value, their accessibility, their reliability, their affordability, their efficiency. Green renewables require tremendous land use for mining and transmission lines. And we got to go on offense in the energy and climate debate because the future of our country and our world depends on it. The fact is, the world is uninhabitable, impoverished, and highly dangerous without fossil fuels. Think back to how man lived thousands of years ago. Would you want to go back to that? The world, again, is uninhabitable, impoverished, and highly dangerous without fossil fuels. Eliminating fossil fuels would have a devastating effect on human life and human flourishing. We currently have as much, thankfully, as 10 times the amount of fossil fuels available to us as has been used in all of history. Again, we have about 10 times the amount of fossil fuels still available to us in the earth as has been used in all of history. So we're not running out, and we're better than ever at extracting, harvesting, and producing and distributing fossil fuels. Fracking, for example, sounds scary. Fracking, oh, it sounds scary. But it actually permits us to fracture shale rock to extract massive quantities of oil and gas that was previously unavailable. So fracking's a good thing. Fossil fuels help us feed 8 billion people today much more efficiently and effectively than we fed 3 billion people just 60 years ago. Fossil fuels help us provide clean air and clean water around the globe. Again, fossil fuels allow us to replace the heat that was previously obtained from burning wood and human dung. And fossil fuels allow us to transport clean water where we need it, or to transport water for irrigation processes. The truth is, again, the left operates from a zero human impact standard when it comes to energy. But without fossil fuels, we cannot produce enough food or clothing or protect ourselves from weather or predators, big predators, lions and tigers and bears or what have you, or microscopic predators, that we use fossil fuels to produce the things we need to protect us from them as well. We can't produce adequate sanitation, medicine, or medical care around the globe without fossil fuels. And we need far more energy, fossil fuel energy in the future. We need to produce more, not less. And this is to supply the unempowered world. About 3 billion people are still in what would be considered the unempowered world. We need to supply them, and that takes more fossil fuels. And we need more fossil fuel for the growing demands of the empowered world, like the United States, for things like AI and data centers and so forth. Current CO2 levels are actually much lower today than they've been throughout most of human history. Again, CO2 levels are lower today than they've been throughout most of human history. We don't have a CO2 crisis. We don't have a climate crisis. The man-made impact on the climate is greatly overstated. Catastrophic man-made climate change is a hoax. We have the demonstrated ability to continue to adapt and adjust to the actual potential of very modest and limited climate change. We need more fossil fuel and energy here and around the globe. For my fellow believers, I want to quote a verse from Genesis 8:22 to encourage you. Genesis 8:22 says, "While the earth remains, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease." Again, Genesis 8:22 says, "While the earth remains, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease." God's got the climate. God has made a resilient earth for humans to flourish upon, and he's made it infinitely sustainable. Democrats are extreme on this issue. The left is extreme on this issue. Democrats could never win another election if Americans understood what Democrats want to do on climate and energy. So don't be afraid of their attacks or their labels that you're a climate denier. They are wrong on this issue, just as they are on every other issue. So I encourage you to study this issue, become a student of energy policy, climate impact, environmental impact. Don't trust the so-called respected experts in our society and our culture, because they are lying to us. Again, I want to recommend the book Fossil Future by my friend Alex Epstein, and give him credit for helping me on this issue to be better and stronger on this issue with factual information. So thanks for joining me for this episode of the Good for America podcast. I want to again ask you to subscribe to the podcast, to rate the show, to refer it to your friends, and follow me on social media at Rev Bob Good. Thank you for joining me. Let's keep the Republic.